Do, 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 do. Does this one work? Is this one working? I can't tell. It looks like it. Cool. Excellent.
Do you want that to be used?
No, it's fine. Oh, okay. Hello, everybody. I think there might be like a few more of you than last time, or possibly less. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. I'm the sucker that's here to teach you guys how to do assignment 4. Woo! All right. So, in the last lecture, we talked about a whole heap of really technical jargon, most of which you've probably already forgotten, but that's fine. As long as you take notes this time, or possibly watch this workshop. I think these get recorded. God, I hope so. I don't know if there's a button I'm supposed to push for that, but I make it up as I go along. All right. So the Generico application that we're hosting today is a really dodgy thing I whipped up in 2015, back when I was doing this assignment, I think. So it's going to kind of look a little bit different to your guys, but mostly the same in terms of how it's implemented. So today, spinning up a EC2 instance. Who can tell me what that is?
It's an instance of EC2.
Thank you. It's an Elastic Cloud instance. It's infrastructure as a service. So what that means is I'll be spinning up a server from scratch. We'll be choosing an operating system for it. We'll be installing Tomcat on it, and then we'll be migrating our data to it. We're also going to be spinning up an RDS instance. Does anyone remember what RDS stands for? Not that guy. Relational Database Service, I think I heard someone say. That's correct. We're going to be turning on a MySQL Community Edition engine on that and loading in our Generico data. For my demonstration, I'm just going to show you guys how to do it with a single database. If you're running a 2-database solution, you basically just spin up 2 databases. Right. So let's might as well just start the whole process from scratch. So you guys will have your own, hopefully have your own Educate accounts soon, if not already. It might look slightly different for you guys than it does for me. I'm going to be running on a full account because I don't have an Educate account anymore. Mine expired. So everything I'm going to show you on this is accessible for you guys in Educate. There are some things that you cannot do in Educate. For example, you can't choose any of the AMIs that are from the community in Educate account. You can only do that in the paid or at least full version accounts, even if the AMIs are free. So I'm going to show you how to use the AMIs that Amazon provide for everyone and get Tomcat rolling. Because what's actually really cool is you can just get a Tomcat AMI and you load it straight into your EC2 instance, and it's already good to go with Tomcat if you have a full account. But anyway, because you guys have Educates, we'll be looking at EC2s from Amazon's base level. So once we get into the console like this, we're presented with all of Amazon's various services. We can see the EC2 over here. There's our S3 bucket. There's RDS. We've got the virtual private clouds over here, Route 53, all the fun stuff's in here. So we're going to start off with EC2, and we're just going to throw everything on a single instance. Now I already have an instance running over here. This is one I spun up last night to make sure I could still remember how to do all this. And I have my really, really terrible 2015 Generico website running live on Amazon right now. So I can select the department, and good, the database still works. And I can select employees, cool. Different departments. All right, so this is all working, and this is live in the cloud right now. You could go to that URL, and you can get it working. All right, so let's create a new instance. We're going to go launch instance. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to provision a virtual machine in the cloud. We're going to choose what is traditionally the top one. It's just the Amazon 64-bit AMI. Select that. It's basically Amazon's homebrew version of Red Hat. We're going to go with the free T2 micro. which comes with one CPU, 1 gigabyte of RAM, and has some limited onboard storage attached to it. We're not going to add any extra storage because this storage that we get with this at the moment is free. And we love the free stuff. Gonna go configure. All right, you guys will have a default network, a default VPC will come with, my Factorio one's still in here. You'll have a default VPC. We're just going to use that one for your assignments. Don't worry about creating your own VPC. That's fine. Your subnets, don't need to change that. When it comes to auto-assign public IP, make sure that's enabled so we can access it later on. We can leave most of this stuff pretty much untouched. I don't think there's anything under advanced we need to touch. Nope. So we're going to add storage. So here we can see it's going to come with 8 gigabytes of SSD storage. We don't need anything extra for that. That'll be fine. I'm not going to add any tags. We'll skip that. Configure security groups. Now this is fairly important. So this basically tells Amazon what firewall you're going to attach to this particular instance. So at the moment, the only port that's open that will be attached to this instance is port 22 for SSH. So if we were just to hit next and hit go, we could set up an Apache server or web server. It would never be able to talk to the outside world. So we have to tell this what ports we want open. Okay? And that's pretty simple. We just hit add rule. And they have a preset list of lots of different things. You know, SSH, SMTP, HTTP, POP3. All the popular ones are there. Okay? You can even tell it to open all of them if you want to live dangerously. But I was going to create a custom rule for TCP. I'm going to make it port 8080. The reason I'm doing that is Tomcat by default will choose port 8080 to serve its web content on. Now, normally we would use port 80 or port 443 for secure connections for web information. Because we're going to be lazy and not change Tomcat's default settings to anything else other than 8080, we're just going to open up port 8080. That's simple. So we'll talk to the web host on port 8080 instead of port 80. We want to be able to access that from anywhere, which is why it's all zeros. We can tell it to just do my IP address if I want to, and it'll find my IP for Flinders and give me that. But I'm just going to set it to anywhere and everywhere, please. That's the only thing we need to set up for this security group, so we can go review and launch. All right, it's giving me a warning. Your security group will allow people from anywhere in the world to access it. So as it stands with my SSH and my port 8080, any IP address is able to come knocking on that door. Given that I'm not running anything particularly secure and the fact that it's going to be a web server, which is intended to be accessed by anyone, I'm not too fast. But if later on I decide that I don't want port 22 for SSH to be accessible by anyone else, I can just go into the security group and modify it. Virtualization. So this gives me an overview of everything that's going to happen. Looks great, looks delicious. You'll see here that the open is for both IPv4 and IPv6. That's cool. Let's just go launch. All right. So the way we can connect to a EC2 instance in Amazon using Amazon's default AMI is by creating a key pair that acts as basically our authentication token. So instead of having to attach a username and password to the SSH to gain access to our EC2 instance, we will be given a special public-private key system. We'll basically be given a private key. So in order to do this, I've already generated a key pair before, so I've got a few of them because I've had the account for a while, but we'll create a new one. So we're going to create a new key pair. I'm going to call it workshop. I'm going to hit download my key pair. Cool, let's just go save it somewhere useful for later. Where is it? There we go. Cloud implementation. Okay, so we're saving the key file. If you lose that key file, you have to basically destroy the instance to start again. Don't lose it. Okay. Launch instance. All right, and it's given me an ID for it. I can go and have a look at my EC2 instances to have a look and see what's going on. All right, so we've got the one that I had previously. That's running. The new one that we just created is in a pending state. It's initializing. So it's being built right now in a data center somewhere over in Sydney. I don't know where. It's just over there. It's happening. Cloud, right? Magical. Cool. Fantastic. While that's building, let's build our database. So we're going to come back to the options. We want RDS. All right, loading, loading, loading. And we want to launch a new database instance. I can hit the show me the free options only, because free is really tasty. MySQL, we're going to select Community Edition because it's free. All right, here we go. So from here, we're just going to go for another T2 micro for the instance class. So this is where we're choosing what kind of underlying compute resources we want for it. If I'd chosen non-free tier, it would show me, I could go for 24 cores and 32 gig of RAM if I wanted to. But 1 core, 1 gig of RAM, that'll be fine. You'll see here that there's no multi-AZ deployment, so this will only launch in one availability zone. If you haven't guessed by now, there will be no redundancy in this example. And you don't need to worry about implementing redundancy for your assignment 4. You just have to document how you would do it. All right, database identifier, workshop. Actually, I'm going to be really boring. I'm just going to call everything generico so I don't have to change anything's code. Hang on. Let me go kill my other database. All right, so I currently have a generico database running. I'm going to terminate it. If I can remember how to do that, right-click, delete. Do I want to create a final snapshot? Nope. I acknowledge that upon deleting my instance, everything will be deleted, blah, 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 blah. Are you sure? Yes, delete that. All right, it's in the process of deleting. Cool, so I'll make a new one. So MySQL, what? No, go back one. Free. Cool. It's the T2 micro, leave everything else the same. Available storage is 5 gigabytes, that's fine. We don't need any more than a megabyte. Calling the database instance generico. Going to call username, password is all generico because it's easy. Oh, it's terminating the old one still, won't let me. Generico 2 it is. Whatever. Okay, so same VPC, same virtual private cloud as the Tomcat server that we'll be building up in a minute so that they're all on the same network. We're not going to be using any kind of elastic load balancers. This is just an EC2 instance and an RDS. Very simple stuff. No preference on availability zone, don't really care. We're going to create a new security group, and I'll modify that probably after it's been built. We can leave the database field empty if we want to, and we can just create one later, and I might just do that because I've got code pre-written for that. So I'm not going to build a database at the moment. I'm just going to provision one, but not actually put anything in it. Okay, let's launch it. Cool. All right, so that's in the process of being provisioned. If we come over here, we can see it's being created. Now, for the security groups, where are we? Because we need to change the security group so that we can let people see it besides ourselves. I'm trying to remember how I do that. Probably have to wait for it to build. All right. So while that's building, let's go back and check out EC2. See if that's finished turning on yet. Okay, so they're both running now. So while we're here, let's kill the old one. So the old one was 254. Cool. So I'm just going to kill the old EC2 instance. Terminate. Cool. Okay, so this thing has finished turning on. It's got a, I don't know if you can see that. It has a public DNS, so we're able to communicate with it that way. It also has a public IP address. All right, so we have our key. So before we can talk to the server, we need to convert the key into something that we can use. All right, so our public-private key. Now, for those of you who are not using Windows, you'll have to have a look on Google for ways of doing it on, say, your Mac client or your Linux client. I'm only going to show you how to do this in Windows for the time being. But it's fairly simple stuff. It's very well documented. Amazon has many walkthroughs on how to do this. But for today's demo, I'm just going to be doing it in Windows. So there are two different applications you're going to need in order to get this to run. One of them is called PuttyGen, and this is where we're going to load in the key. Okay, so we're going to load in the key that the key file that we just got from Amazon for our EC2 instance. And where did I put that? I put that in my OneDrive, ECS, Cloud. I'm going to get it to show me all the files, not just the putty files. And I want my workshop one. There it goes, workshop. So successfully imported. That's great. Hit OK. I want to save the private key from the keygen. And it says, are you sure you want to save it without a passcode? Yes, I don't really care. And we'll just call it workshop key. OK. Now we can open up Putty, and let's punch in the public DNS for our server that we've just spun up. So copy that. Now, with all Amazon AMI instances, the username for it is ec2-user, okay? So if I punch this in now, and try and open up the SSH. Oh, hang on, I need to attach my key first to it. So under SSH, we're going to go down to auth. And under auth, we're going to attach the private key. And this is before we try and SSH in. All right, so we got that in there. Just going to save this connection for later. And let's connect. Sure I want to connect to it? Yes. And it'll ask for user, ec2-user, enter, and we're in. I don't know how that looks on your screen, but there it is. Now this is using, like I said, Amazon's version of Red Hat. So we need to use Red Hat commands when we want to do stuff in it. It's very similar to most distributions of Linux. You guys are probably most familiar with Debian and whatnot, like from Kali. But this is still fairly simple. Now we're not root, so we have to use sudo still. So we're going sudo yum install tomcat 8. Yes, I do want to install that. That's great. Now the really cool thing with Amazon is they have their own repositories buried deep in their infrastructure. So we just installed all of that from just another server sitting in the data center somewhere. So now we have Tomcat installed, okay? Which is fantastic. Alrighty. So there's two things we now need to do in order to get our NetBeans application working in here. We need to include the, I think it was JSTL files, and we also need to drop in the MySQL database driver, okay? Now, using Windows, I'm going to use WinSCP for that, to get those files in there. Just because it's easy drop and drag, you could obviously use terminal as well. But before I can do that, I need to change the permissions so that WinSCP can actually get in there and change those things. So there are two file locations I'm going to need to change. So the first one, so sudo chmod. I'm going to cheat and just do lots of oh wait, no, I need to do -r for recursive, so every other file in this folder too. 777, which means permissions for everyone. It's not very secure, wouldn't recommend doing that. But I'm going to because I'm lazy. Tomcat 8, web apps. That's what I'm going to change. All right, so I've just changed the file there, or that folder, so that I can drop my JSP files in there and whatnot later on. And now I'm going to change the folder that I need in order to drop the drivers and libraries. I'll upload a walkthrough on how to do these changes to Flow, so that you guys can reference that later on when you get to this stage. But now I'm just changing it so I can drop stuff into the Java file, because we need to get those libraries in there. Nope, I spelled something wrong, did I? Oh, USR. Cool. Alrighty, so coming over to WinSCP now, I can punch in the same host name, username, I'll just put it as ec2-user, come down to advanced, SSH authentication, I punch in that same private key that we were using just before. Let's log in, eh? Yes, connect, please. Okay. So we're in. So I'm just going to navigate to, let's put the libraries in first. So it's under user. No, that's temp, user, share, Java, and Tomcat 8. All right. So I'll upload a copy of these dependencies as well with my announcement. So there's these two jar files, which is the JSTL and the MySQL driver. We just drop and drag those in here. There we go. We've updated the server now with some drivers. Now let's take a moment and talk about our code. All right, so when you were trying to get your application in NetBeans to talk to your MySQL server, you had that context.xml file that would tell the system how to build and where to look for the database for your application. We're going to have to change a couple of things. Okay, so let's have a look at index real quick in here. Hopefully I've got Notepad++ installed. I do. So what we're going to need to do is you're going to need to add something like this to the start of each one of your JSPs. Can I make that bigger? I can. So essentially, instead of having a context.xml which controls the database location for all of your files, you're just going to need to add in this line of code which sets up a data source in each JSP. So it's very similar to what you have in the context.xml, and it's a lot shorter, but we just need to drop that in for each of the JSP files that you have. And then we need to change the data source location in your SQL queries. I'll be uploading an example of what you need to change in Flow in the same announcement, just because otherwise these are a real pain in the butt to try and troubleshoot on your own. But essentially, yeah, we drop this in. We have a database variable, a variable called database. We point to the driver, the MySQL driver. We then need to point to the database URL with the username and the password in there. In the data source for the MySQL queries, we just put in the variable of $database, and that will point to this up here. And that's how it knows where to get its data from. Now, before we can push this up, we're going to need to tell it where the new database is, because we've just killed the old one. So let's head back over here. We'll go to our RDS. Now, the database at the moment is still empty. Haven't forgotten that. We'll deal with that in a minute. But let's find out what our public address is for our database. There it is. Yes?
Do you know what PL, so workshop.pl, what's this?
Workshop the PEM. That's the PuTTY private key file.
You know what's PEM? PEM?
Probably permission. I'm not sure what that extension specifically refers to, but if I had to guess, it's probably permission.
Privacy enhancement. Privacy enhancement.
Maybe. I honestly don't know.
No, I agree with it.
Okay, cool.
But so I'm just going to interrupt your lecture to tell me that. You're welcome.
We learn something every day. All right, so URL for the MySQL is much the same. Here, we just replace this section. Is that right? Oh, we still need to refer to the database in it too. All right, cool. So my database will be called Generico, and it's hosted on the Generico 2 instance on Amazon. So I'm just going to copy this line. I'm going to paste it into my other documents. So I've got an index.jsp, a response.jsp, and I think I've got one more somewhere that I need to modify as well. I think I actually saved index. Nope. And where's my last one? Emergency.jsp. Cool. All right, so all my files are now up to date. So let's head back over to WinSCP, because now we're going to drop those files into the actual share that allows Tomcat to host those web apps. And that is located, where is it buried? All right. It's in the var lib tomcat 8 web apps. And in here, what you want to do is you want to create a new folder for your web app. Which one of these is going to do new folder? That one. We'll call it Generico. Once again, you could do this all on terminal, but here we are. It's going to grab the emergency.jsp, the index, and the response. And I'm just going to, oh, and I also want the style sheet because it's ugly. Cool, they're all copied across. Heading back over to the terminal, we're going to restart the Tomcat 8, so it then loads in the new libraries and the driver, and then it'll also start hosting the database, not the database, but the web content, okay? If anyone has questions at any stage, do hoy out, yeah? Okay. Sudo, what is it, service, restart, no, it was Tomcat 8 restart, I think. Cool. It says okay, that's good news. Alrighty. So that's rebooting. Now we should get some data into that database, eh? So I'm going to use NetBeans because you guys will be familiar with how to interact with a database using NetBeans, and it's pretty simple stuff. I don't think I need WinSCP up anymore, but I'll just minimize it just in case I forget something. Alrighty. Alright, so this security group for this instance is called RDS Launch Wizard 1. I'm just going to click on that because I want to check to make sure that's set up correctly. So if we have a look at the inbound traffic, okay. So this tells me that the only person who can access the database currently is this laptop, which is not particularly useful for our Tomcat server. So if I don't modify this, the Tomcat EC2 server will never be able to talk to the database even though they're in the same VPC, because the security group that this is attached to will only let this database server talk to this laptop. So we're just going to quickly edit that, and we're just going to change the source to anyone or anywhere and just hit save. And now literally any computer on the planet could talk to it. Ideally, you'd probably want to find out what the private IP address was for your EC2 instance in the VPC and point it to that. But because we still need to load some data into it at the moment, and because it's not really a big issue, because it's not doing any kind of secure mission critical stuff, I'm just going to leave that open for now. They would still need to know my incredibly, incredibly complex password in order to access it. Generico. And outbound should be all traffic. Yep, so traffic can go out from anywhere, but there are some cases where you can limit incoming. Right, so the database is now open to the world. That's fantastic. We've got its endpoint there, so let's go and connect to that in NetBeans. So much the same way that we were communicating with Flinders servers, we're just going to go to databases, new connection, MySQL, next. Paste that in, I think that's right. Let's get rid of the port there. Oh, we don't need any of that. Now, at the moment, there's technically no database in the database instance. So I can't actually connect to anything at the moment. So I'm just going to remove database from there. It's just going to leave it blank for now. I'll build one with my SQL. To test that connection, please work. Yes, it's a good feeling. All right, next, finished, cool. So now we have a database connection here in Tomcat, in NetBeans. So here's some SQL that I prepared earlier. Just going to open that up here in NetBeans. Now, it's kind of small. I can't seem to make it any bigger at the moment. Is there a plus? Nope. Anyway, I've got a query. Part of my query here is create database, Generico. I'm then saying I want to use that database, and then I've basically got the same code as you guys do for everything else, or what you guys will produce. So much the same way that we do with the university, Drop down, I can't remember which one, number 2. Selecting that database, hit play, and this should load it with 0 errors. Fantastic. So now we've got all of our data located in the RDS database in the cloud. So as it stands, our Tomcat server is good to go. It's got its instance loaded, its security is set up so that anyone should be able to access it. And now we've got the database set up so that it can communicate with that as well. So theoretically, I'm just going to close this. If I come back to my EC2 instance, and I grab its public DNS, which should be here. Okay, new tab, HTTP, posting that in. Because I'm trying to access a website on a port other than 80 or 443, I have to specify the port. So 8080 by putting in a colon, /generico, because that's the folder that I've got it all sitting in the web apps. Theoretically, if I hit enter now, it should work. Yes. Here we go. So here's website. Done, and if I hit submit, it should give me back queries, which it does. Fantastic. There we go. Now, for assignment 4, you don't have to necessarily do a Tomcat implementation. If you want to rewrite this entire thing using like a LAMP stack with PHP, knock yourself out. Tomcat is interesting to work with sometimes. And there are definitely better ways of doing some of this stuff. Now you guys will have 2 databases to spin up. You can potentially run them both in the same RDS instance. You just create a new database in that RDS instance and give it another unique name. Or you could just spin up another instance, doesn't really matter. So yeah, that's all running in the cloud somewhere. Cool stuff. Does anyone have any questions at this stage? Yeah, up the back.
When I send a request against space management, like wireless computers,
Yep.
are they going to email me and say,
Yeah, so the process generally goes that you apply, say you're a student, you feed them your Flinders email account. They'll take either a day or 2 weeks to get back to you. It is that extreme. And you'll get an email back that you get provided with your login details and your password, and then you're given access to the Educate system. Yep.
So that link's on Flow?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Is it on Flow? Has anyone found it? Maybe. Apparently it's on Flow. I'll have a look and see if I can find it and maybe post it up again. Because I have a bucket of announcements to make in relation to this assignment, like that brief walkthrough on how you go about including the drivers and libraries and which folders you have to change the permissions on, stuff like that. Stuff in relation to accessing it via SSH, you can find lots and lots of information on that from Amazon themselves. They post a lot of walkthroughs on there. So if you get stuck at any stage, I would recommend consulting the AWS documentation. Yeah, any other questions? Yep.
you said like in terms of the security stuff that you did, like permission and stuff, do you expect us to just do what you did, or?
Yep. So, okay, so for the context, in the context of showing me a deliverable or showing one of your other tutors a deliverable for the assignment 4, look, we're not going to be overly stressed about security or anything like that. We're just wanting to see you guys using the tools. We want to see you guys spinning up instances. We want to see you guys mucking around with databases and whatnot in the cloud. Worrying about hardcore security at this stage is not worth it. But what we do want to see in your reports is a roadmap and justification for those things. So if we go back really quick to, where was it? So that slide content I had earlier. Oh, whatever. Right. So if we go back to this, this is incredibly secure because we've got the different VPCs for that, different VPCs for this. They're in their own availability zones. And even those things there are probably on their own VPCs, so they can only be accessed by these guys. So you need to talk about those things conceptually. You need to include them in your report. You need to say why it's set up like that. When you actually implement this yourself, you're essentially only implementing one database and one EC2 instance. Like, that's it. That's all you guys are actually doing for the implementation. But we would like to see a full-scale roadmap for what you would recommend Generico does for when this project gets much bigger. Because the expectation is that Generico wants to grow. They want to go they've got 2 countries under their belt at the moment. They want to go more than that. They're expecting growth. They want a platform and a system that can grow with them, and cloud will give them that opportunity. Now, admittedly, they're still using custom solutions, and that'll just be a reality that you're going to have to deal with. They're not using some sort of business process as a service or software as a service. They are hosting their own custom content. But this is a platform that they've chosen. This is the way they want to do it. And now we need to support them in that, and we need to provide them with a roadmap for the future. Now, whether or not you guys decide that you think like maybe this entire implementation would be fantastic for Generico, because this is just a fairly good web app solution, that might be something you put forward in your report, but you need to be able to justify in it everything. If I see an elastic load balancer, I want you to tell me why it's there. If I see one elastic load balancer, I want you to explain to me that it is a service, and that's why it's only visually represented as one instance. If you're including an S3 bucket, I want to know why. Stuff like that. In some cases, you're going to get better marks if you have a more simple diagram that is better, explained in a better way than having an incredibly complex diagram that you can't explain. Because you will get marked down. If you've got multiple redundancy systems in there and you can't tell me why they're there or explain how they work, that's meaningless. What I'd much rather see is maybe just a couple of servers and a database, and you go, yeah, these servers are here and this is why, and this database is here and that's why, and maybe even throw in something like a recommendation for the future is to include redundancy for the database. Maybe they don't need it right now. Maybe there's recommendations for the future you could throw in. But we want to see a roadmap, and we want to see that very well detailed and explained and justified. So are there any components at the moment that you guys have questions about? Any AWS services, any questions in relation to the assignment? Is there anything you guys don't understand? I'm sure you'll have questions in time when you probably get closer to actually doing this part of the coursework.
When that does happen, you just one-to-one.
Yeah, you can just one-to-one me. But yeah, if you have questions now, that'd be ideal, because then they get recorded.
What program do you recommend for making nice?
Right, so this visualization is done, it's a free tool, it's actually really powerful. It's included in the assignment information. It's cloudcraft.co. And what it is, it's a free diagramming tool. Let me just pull it across, hang on, see if I can switch it back to. Yep, so they're the company that makes it. Let me just put this back to duplicate real quick so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so so this is a tool for diagramming different environments, and this is a pre-built one that Cloudcraft has done. And what you can do, it's really cool, is you can design and develop an entire system in Cloudcraft and then build it in AWS automatically. So you can, if I could find the button somewhere, you can, I think you export it and then you import it into AWS, and it goes, oh, okay, you've got 2 databases, you've got different AZs, you've got different, elastic load balancers, because it's the way it's diagrammed is it's good to go. The system knows what it's looking at. It's got different availability zones, different VPCs. It's all in there. And each object, you can click on them individually, and it'll show you how much it costs. So an M4 large on a Linux platform is $72 a month. Okay? It's a big server. An M3 in the current implementation is $95 a month. Oh, here we go. They've asked for 2 CPUs, 6.5 ECUs, 8 gigabytes of memory, 32 gigabyte of storage, SSD storage. The S3 bucket doesn't have a price because that dynamically scales. CloudFront probably doesn't have a price either because that also dynamically scales. An Elastic Load Balancer is $18 a month.
Can you do retarded things and it accept it?
Yeah, it just means that it won't import properly.
Load balancing, load balancing?
Probably.
Like load balancing, so I load balance, you load balance.
Like, you know, if you could connect the dots, you could probably just throw that in there. There we go. Sure, why not? Prepare for trouble and make it double. Then we got 2 elastic load balancers. And a fail. That's what we have. So don't do that. But you got all the different parts here, you know, from EC2. You just drop and drag it in, so there's a T2. You can specify which region you want it in. So let's come back to Australia. Cool. So a T2 micro, let's go, is it a burst? Yeah, let's go burst, why not? So that'll cost us $11.50 a month to run. And that's just the basic one that we're running, okay? And then we probably want, where's not storage, where's database? RDS, here we go. Let's run an RDS. Cool, yep, we want the SQL engine. We probably don't need a large, but it looks like that might be the only option they're going to give us. Oh, it's because of M4 standard. Let's change that back to a T2 burst and a micro, $18 a month. Let's connect that to, that's fine. That's great. Cool. And that's essentially what you're building. That's it, we're done.
Are the separate components actually worth that much per month?
Yes. It's so, this item, a T2 micro in Sydney, costs $11.52 a month to run.
And if you want a database, that's...
And if you wanted a database, $18.72 a month to run. So,
It's like, what? 1 cent an hour per micro?
yeah, it's less than 1 cent an hour, I think. I can't remember. But you can pull that up. Like, I think it's just like AWS EC2 pricing. Oops. So here we go, like on-demand pricing, spot pricing, reserved pricing, and dedicated hosts. Oh, that's another one. You can dedicate, you can request that hardware is dedicated for you. Very expensive. But most of us will probably muck around with on-demand at some point. So here we go. A T2 micro, you're looking at 0.012 cents an hour to run. 0.012 cents. Oh, sorry, yeah, dollars. Yeah, my mistake. Or, yeah, 1 cent. So they're the different pricing scales and the different sorts of memory you have there as well. ECU is a fairly new addition to the Amazon world. It's related to burst processing. I'm not going to get too far into how that technically works because it's a bit of a mess, but have a read up on that. Just be more focused on virtual CPUs and RAM. So, you know, like a 4 CPU system with 16 gigabytes of RAM is 20 cents an hour to run in the cloud. So you know, with all of those different services, you know, something like, where was it? This is actually pretty expensive. That's a really expensive setup. And for Generico, with their army of like 50 people or whatever they have working for them, this could potentially be overkill, significant overkill. Where is there a... There we go, $1,000 a month to run, $959 to run that a month. That's kind of getting pricey for 50 people. There's bound to be cheaper alternatives. Does Generico need 2 availability zones? Does it need that level of redundancy? Could there be downtime? And would that be acceptable?
You also have to account for the regions being different pricing. So
Yep, different regions, different pricing. Ideally, because you have most of your workforce in Australia, you'd probably leave it in Sydney. But then how much latency is there with a payroll system if you're accessing it from Taiwan anyway? Up to you guys. Whatever you come up with, you need to be able to justify it. You could say, you could argue that perhaps you implement half of it now. So maybe you do just 1 availability zone and go, when you guys get to a sufficient size, you could migrate your system into a bigger system. You might say that you don't need a front end and back end system. Maybe you don't need a presentation layer and a logic layer. Perhaps you could get away with, because the application is so simple, maybe just 1 server could do both. And then maybe when it gets bigger, then you could look into splitting up the roles between servers. But you need to think about what kind of application it's running and the sort of load that you're expecting it to get from the employees. And then how that changes over time as Generico potentially gets bigger. So there's a lot of assumptions in there you guys get to make. And you're allowed to make assumptions as long as those assumptions are documented. I don't want to see this sort of diagram and you go, this is obviously the best decision for Generico based on no assumptions whatsoever. That doesn't help me. I also don't want to see just 1 database and 1 server and you go, this is perfect for Generico with no assumptions. You are allowed to make assumptions, just document them.
can we assume that every time a single Generico employee wants to access the system, everyone will access the system at the same time?
You can definitely talk about peak load. Like payday, for instance, is going to be a day where you're expecting heavy load, whereas people going to make sure they've got the right payment or something.
End of financial year would definitely be the
End of financial year, any time in auditor, like end of financial year with auditing is probably, you could probably expect at least a spike in usage for that moment as they just pull all the reports out.
So casually just based
You know, that could be a justification for auto scaling. You know, every Wednesday, every second Wednesday, we're expecting a huge jump in usage. Let's just throw auto scaling in there. And if too many employees are trying to access it at the same time, we'll just scale out. Maybe add an extra server for a couple of hours and scale back when everyone goes home. But it's up to you to figure out how you want to do this.
Can't you scale it based on usage?
Can you scale it based on what?
So based on when, so if lots of people are using it and you have a certain amount of users, oh, we have a certain amount of people using it at this point. Add another server to the lot.
Yeah. Yep. That's scaling up. You can do preemptive scaling.
Rather than having to try and predict when groups of people.
Yeah, so you can either do predictive scaling where you know that at 5 o'clock your workload's going to go up, so you preemptively throw up new servers, or you do dynamically scaling, which is the CPU hit 80% on that unit, let's spin up another one. And when the CPU goes back down to 60, maybe we turn one of them off.
Yeah.
But you generally want to use it for the full hour that you have it, because remember, you've paid for that hour whether you not use it. All right, guys, any other questions? Nope. Cool, thank you, goodbye.